Recently, there has been a phenomenon of beggars lining the streets in various parts of China, as seen in viral videos. Beggars either standing or kneeling crowd entire streets, creating a scene that is quite shocking. This is despite China's being touted as the world's second largest economy and claiming that in 2023, the per capita disposable income of residents reached over 39,000 yuan, equivalent to almost 5,400 US dollars. Questions arise as to why scenes of destitution like these are prevalent in what is supposed to be a prosperous era. Even more surprising is that these scenes are not confined to remote rural areas, but have been witnessed in first-tier cities like Guangzhou. Across from Yuexiu Park, beggars have crowded entire streets. In the bustling metropolis of Shenzhen, another first-tier city in China, scenes of extreme poverty are evident on Longhua Ping Road. People who are unable to afford housing are forced to sleep rough on the streets. In contrast, look at the glittering cityscapes and extensive high-speed rail networks that adorn China, along with the ostentatious display of wealth by government officials and their children worldwide. The Chinese Communist government has indeed proven itself worthy of its status as the world's second largest economy. The stark contrast and harsh realities are too glaring to ignore. But a pertinent question arises. In 2023, China's fiscal expenditure amounted to a staggering 27.5 trillion yuan, with a deficit of 6 trillion yuan. In 2022, fiscal expenditure soared to 37 trillion yuan, with a 9 trillion yuan deficit. These figures even surpass the expenditures during the outbreak of the pandemic in 2020, when fiscal spending neared 25 trillion yuan, with a 7 trillion yuan deficit. Many well-intentioned Chinese citizens had believed that after a decade of Xi Jinping anti-corruption campaign, unnecessary spending would be curtailed, leading to ample fiscal surpluses. But in their dismay, fiscal expenditures have continued to rise annually, deficits have reached trillions, and fiscal challenges are becoming increasingly daunting. Cai Shen-kun, a seasoned financial commentator based in the United States, vented his frustration on social media platform X, asking angrily, "Where has the money of Chinese taxpayers gone?" The soul search in question reflects the collective sentiment of the Chinese people. Addressing this issue means examining the vast population reliant on fiscal support under the CCP regime. The term fiscally supported personnel refers to those whose personal incomes and office expenses are covered by the government. In China, this group mainly consists of three categories: civil servants under CCP and government departments, primarily serving in various levels of CCP committees, congresses, governments, judicial organs, political consultative conferences, democratic parties, and mass organizations; personnel of various institutions working in fields such as education, scientific research, and healthcare; and the third category compromises retirees from party and government organs and institutions. These groups neither produce nor create any wealth, but solely rely on state funding, consuming the hard-earned income of society's laborers. According to the 2009 local fiscal statistics published by the Ministry of Finance in 2012, by the end of 2009, the total number of locally funded personnel, excluding the central government, was about 53.9 million nationwide. These are individuals with civil service positions or working in government institutions. Additionally, there are numerous quasi-fiscal dependent personnel in China. These are people who are not on the government's payroll, but effectively receive financial support or benefits from the state. This includes over 600,000 village committees and more than 80,000 neighborhood committees, totaling approximately 2.8 million people. Therefore, by the end of 2009, the actual number of people supported by China's fiscal system exceeded 57 million. By 2012, this figure had surpassed 60 million. This data does not include individuals supported by central government finances. In reality, there are also large numbers of temporary workers outside of China's fiscal support system. State-owned enterprises and public institutions employ numerous officials who are not directly supported by fiscal means but ultimately rely on the general public. Additionally, there are significant numbers of personnel in self-sustaining departments, such as urban management personnel and highway toll collectors, who operate outside the fiscal budget framework. They generate revenue through fines, with a portion going to the government and the rest distributed as salaries. If all these individuals were taken into account, China's population supported by fiscal means could exceed 100 million. Even if we assume 60 million individuals are supported by the state, with China's population of 1.35 billion, the ratio of officials to civilians would be about 1 to 21. But this estimation is inaccurate. It's important to note that out of the 1.3 billion people, aside from retirees and children still in school, only one third, or over 400 million, constitute the labor force, with 60 million being officials and the remaining 360 million being workers. Hence, the ratio of officials to civilians should be closer to 1 and 6. Considering that the expenses for one official certainly exceed those for two ordinary citizens, the actual ratio might be closer to 1 and 3. This implies that every 3 workers in China are supporting one non-contributing individual. China's Tieling City, with a population of 3 million and the GDP of 4.6 billion US dollars, the number of city leaders stands at a staggering 41, with one party secretary, 4 deputy secretaries, 11 standing committee members, 1 mayor, 9 deputy mayors, 3 mayoral assistants, 1 director of the People's Congress, 7 deputy directors, 1 chairman of the Political Consultative Conference, and 8 vice chairmen. Additionally, the government boasts 20 deputy secretaries at the division level, meaning each mayor is accompanied by an average of 2 deputy secretaries. CCP officials are quite costly. A mayor's annual official expenses alone could exceed millions of yuan. There's a joke circulating on the internet that suggests that CCP could resolve disputes without sending troops to the Diaoyu Islands. Instead, they could dispatch a group of urban management officers. Similarly, to deal with Taiwan, they wouldn't need to engage in military combat. Instead, sending several county party secretaries would suffice. This is because in China, urban management officers have shown themselves capable of oppressing citizens. County party secretaries wielding immense power could bankrupt Taiwan just by their lavish lifestyles without the need for actual warfare. A county party secretary in China is equivalent to a local emperor. It's quite common for a county-level government to spend millions of yuan on extravagant feasts and receptions, either consumed by the party secretary personally or squandered through lavish and wasteful expenditures. These immense numbers reflect not only the blotted scale of the CCP government, but also the astronomical expenditures of fiscal resources. Taking the well-known city Hegang as an example, according to the 2020 financial statement published by the Hegang Municipal Finance Bureau, government operating expenses alone amounted to a staggering 1.5 billion yuan. When factoring in personal costs and retiree pensions, the annual expenditure reached about 53 billion yuan. But the city's total tax and non-tax revenue for 2020 amounted to only around 2.3 billion yuan. This means that the expenditure exceeded the revenue by more than double, resulting in a severe deficit. It's no wonder that Hegang, with its reputation for housing prices as low as tens of thousands of yuan per unit, is economically unsustainable. Setting aside other factors, the excessive fiscal expenditure alone is sufficient to drag down the entire city. Cities like Hegang are common throughout China, which is why almost every province and municipality in China has frightening levels of local debt, some of which have reached the point where annual fiscal revenue is insufficient even to cover interest payments. Over the past 4 decades, the CCP government has undergone several rounds of institutional reform in an attempt to streamline the bloated workforce, but each effort has been met with strong resistance. In recent years, the alarming youth unemployment rate has prompted the CCP government to attempt to expand the civil service as a means to alleviate unemployment. But expanding the civil service will not solve the unemployment crisis affecting tens of millions of people. Furthermore, the already overburdened fiscal support system cannot sustain the additional personnel and fiscal expenditure. The CCP's reckless actions in the face of economic difficulties reveal a lack of direction and competence, reflecting a situation that many view as problematic and concerning. But it's not just active duty personnel. The CCP also harbors a massive privileged class, a fact that has never been openly disclosed. In China, retired high ranking officials enjoy retirement benefits far beyond the standards of the general population, a phenomenon unparalleled globally. In democratic countries, elected presidents and officials become ordinary citizens upon leaving office and usually can no longer enjoy the perks they had while in office. But in mainland China, retired high ranking officials continue to enjoy lifelong privileges, including dedicated drivers, security guards, healthcare, and several luxurious family vacations every year, all at the expense of taxpayers. Just the public benefits alone, when calculated for each retired provincial level and higher ranking official, amounts to tens of millions of yuan annually. With over 30,000 retired provincial level and deputy provincial level officials, this roughly equates to over 300 billion yuan, or over 41 billion US dollars annually. This figure only accounts for publicly disclosed benefits. The undisclosed perks are even more alarming. For example, some retired officials' healthcare expenses can exceed 100 million yuan, or 13.7 billion US dollars per person per year, all funded by taxpayers. This is the privileged class of the CCP, who continue to exploit the Chinese people year after year. This is why, despite China's wealth, there are still 600 million people earning a monthly income of only 1,000 yuan, or 137 US dollars, struggling to make ends meet. But the question of where do the Chinese taxpayers' money go only reveals part of the answer. Apart from the excessive number of personnel supported by fiscal means, which is a visible source of wasteful spending, there are several relatively less known reasons contributing to the wastage. For example, military expenditure, foreign aid, the Belt and Road Initiative, internal stability maintenance costs, and global propaganda expenses. Each of these consumes vast amounts of resources. Yet, in most cases, the CCP must conduct them covertly, providing fertile ground for corruption within the bureaucratic system. How can the wealth created by Chinese taxpayers not be continuously drained away? On March 5th, the budget proposal submitted at the second session of the CCP 14th National People's Congress revealed that the defense budget for 2024 is approximately 228 billion US dollars. It represents 7.2% increase, consistent with the growth rate of the previous year. Over the past 15 years, CCP defense spending has increased significantly. Although the CCP publishes defense budget figures annually, outside estimates of actual military spending often far exceed official data. In 2002, a report from the US Department of Defense suggested that Chinese actual defense spending could be 4 times higher than the official budget. With tensions escalating in the Taiwan Strait and South China Sea in recent years, the CCP has continued to increase defense spending accordingly. The arms race, coupled with nuclear reactors and fully electric propulsion in the construction of China's fourth aircraft carrier, undoubtedly adds to the pressure on China's finances. Just as the former Soviet Union collapsed under the burden of its frantic arms race, today's CCP may be trending a similar path. Over the years, in pursuit of international influence, the CCP has often employed tactics such as massive interest-free loans and graduations aid to make it rain. Since Xi Jinping came to power, he has spearheaded an ambitious global initiative known as the Belt and Road Initiative, enticing participating countries with large-scale infrastructure projects such as airports, railways, and ports. The aim was to subsequently control resources such as ports and minerals in these countries, effectively engaging in a new form of colonization. But as many participating countries fall into debt traps and become unable to repay, China's investments in multiple countries have resulted in massive losses, compounded by its own economic challenges. Consequently, many Belt and Road projects have stalled, leading to economic crisis and social unrest in several participating countries. After a decade of the Belt and Road Initiative, the exact extent of economic losses remains unclear. While it's understandable that the CCP spares no expense in military competition, what is even more concerning is its expenditure on maintaining social stability. According to the Japanese media Nikkei Asia, in 2020, China's social stability maintenance expenditures reached a staggering 210 billion US dollars, more than doubling over the past decade and surpassing military spending by 7%. With ubiquitous surveillance cameras, stringent internet monitoring, and well-trained suppression teams, the CCP's expenditures on social stability maintenance are not only astonishingly large, but also seem to have no limit. While military spending can be understood as investment in external defense, expenditures on social stability maintenance are purely aimed at suppressing internal dissent and treating the country's own people as imaginary enemies. It's hard to imagine any democratic regime or elected government allocating a budget for social stability maintenance that exceeds military spending. This clearly highlights the CCP's antagonistic nature towards its own people. Only in a dictatorial authoritarian regime does such extensive investment in surveillance and suppression occur, all aimed at maintaining its own rule, often at the expense of its citizens' rights and freedoms. In China, all official media outlets are CCP mouthpieces. Virtually all media platforms lack supervisory functions, operating under strict CCP surveillance to propagate official narratives. This system, implemented over many years, has become one of the CCP's perceived effective brainwashing tactics. Consequently, the CCP has been promoting this system globally for over 2 decades. Through initiatives such as Confucius Institutes, disseminating so-called Chinese culture, hefty investments in advertising in foreign media, the CCP even set up its own media outlets and controlling media platforms. The CCP has constructed a global propaganda network, whitewashing its image and spreading its toxic ideology and values worldwide. In 2016, British media estimated that the CCP spends about 10 billion US dollars annually on its global propaganda efforts. Over the years, this expenditure has likely only increased, but due to its secretive nature, the exact amount spent by the CCP on global propaganda remains undisclosed. The expenses incurred by the CCP, whether it's military spending, stability maintenance costs, lavish spending on the Belt and Road Initiative, or the hefty sums on international propaganda, all are shrouded in secrecy. That resulted in significantly understated figures even when disclosed. This extreme lack of transparency provides ample opportunity for relevant departments, bureaucrats, and their accomplices to engage in rampant corruption. Take, for example, the well-known corruption within the Chinese military, which surpasses even that of government officials. Since assuming power, Xi Jinping has ostensibly tackled corruption, purging former generals Guo Boxiong and Xu Caiho from the military, often referred to as tigers. But as long as the CCP system persists, there will always be officials engaging in corruption. As for foreign aid and the Belt and Road Initiative, the opaqueness surrounding them has made them an excellent conduit for the CCP elite to launder money and transfer wealth overseas. Since Xi Jinping came to power, the scale of China's foreign aid has continued to expand, and the Belt and Road Initiative has flourished globally, garnering widespread attention. While many may perceive Xi's disregard for China's vast impoverished population as foolish, the reality is quite different. Xi Jinping's approach is far from foolish. In fact, it represents an exceptionally astute strategy for transferring wealth. Its aim is to redirect funds that originally belonged to all taxpayers into the pockets of the elite, the princelings, and the families of the Red CCP's second and third generations. The CCP regime prevalently engages in splurging abroad to garner support from smaller and poorer nations and gain more international influence. But examining its operational model reveals that the funds are typically not in cash, but in the form of project assistance. These funds are deposited into accounts of multinational companies established by the princelings, who then keep the majority of the funds and subcontract the projects. Therefore, what is touted as foreign aid and the Belt and Road Initiative is essentially a smokescreen for money laundering, a complete absence of oversight, allowing the transfer of wealth overseas. Thus, the wealth of the Chinese people is systematically drained by the CCP elites. As early as 2013, in the Chinese New Citizens movement, there were grassroots actions protesting outside the Xidan shopping mall in Beijing. People demanded that officials disclose their assets. Predictably, the banners were torn down by police, according to the usual practice of the CCP. These protesters would likely face imprisonment. Even socialist countries like Vietnam have implemented asset disclosure for officials, but the CCP officials still refuse to disclose their assets, perhaps because the amounts involved are staggering due to widespread corruption. The fear is that if these assets were disclosed, it would immediately enrage the Chinese people. Just as the Chinese people have never seen a ballot, Chinese taxpayers have never had the right to know where their taxes are being spent. The question of where Chinese taxpayers' money is going is destined to remain unanswered under CCP rule. Recently, Argentine President Milei said in a speech that the previous Argentine government was like a criminal organization. This description is equally applicable if we replace the subject with the CCP government.